What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here coming at y'all with another Week 7 college football preview. And we are moving to, in my opinion, one of the most underrated matchups of the weekend. We got the number 19 BYU Cougars traveling down to McLean Stadium to take on the Baylor Bears in what will be a Big 12 matchup in the coming years. But right now, it serves as a very, very important non conference matchup for both of these teams. This game could play such a big role in determining whether BYU can find themselves in the New Year's Six Bowl race. And it could also be interesting to see if Baylor can finally get some respect, get in the top 25, and even potentially could challenge for the Big 12 moving forward. This week could really be a big stepping stone for this Dave Aranda led team. Now, BYU comes in 5-1, man. They had a very tough loss last weekend to Boise State, but they had multiple injuries that really hindered that team last week, and they're getting a lot of those guys back this week. So I don't expect a big hangover from that Boise State game for the Cougars. And if they win this game, they get their fourth Power Five win of the season. They already got wins over three Pac-12 teams, including Arizona State and Utah. And a win here, like I said, will put them right in the thick of things for that New Year's Six Bowl race with the Coastal Carolina, with potentially a Cincinnati if they don't make the playoffs. So BYU has to keep winning, and last week was a huge setback for them as they found themselves at 10th in the country, and then now they drop back to 19 after that tough loss. So expect a very, very motivated BYU team in McLean Stadium this weekend. Now, the Bears also come in at 5-1. They're looking to get a huge non-conference win to potentially spark their Big 12 run. They coming off a big win over West Virginia. They had a loss 2 weeks ago against Oklahoma State in a very tough ranked Big 12 matchup, but they still have their whole schedule ahead of them. They have the TCUs, they have the Oklahomas, they have they have the Texases, so they have a way to get back into this Big 12 race. A win this weekend will put them at 6-1, and they got the whole world in front of them in terms of making a real run at something special this season. Now, even though this is going to be a conference matchup, this will only be the third matchup between Baylor and BYU. The series is tied 1-1. The Bears won in Waco in 1983, and BYU won a convincing game in Provo in 1984. This is good. This is going to be a yearly matchup, but in terms of historical significance, it's only been played twice. So this will be the third one live on ESPN at 2:30 p.m. Central Time. Now, the keys to the game, man. The keys for the Cougars, for me, has to be the rushing attack. And getting that aspect of the offense rolling really sets up Jaron Hall to be to be at his best when the run game's going. Hall can be dynamic in the pocket, not have to carry the entire offense by himself, and he has the arm potential to beat loaded boxes and work off the play action. So that's where the Cougars are going to thrive this weekend. Now they're averaging over 400 yards of total offense. The rushing attack is at over 160 per game, while the passing attack's averaging over 230 yards through the air. And listen, the running game is where BYU really, I guess, thrives. Tyler Algier at the running back spot has been one of the most explosive and consistent running backs in the country for 2 years now. He was one of the guys that really broke out during the COVID season. He's going to be an X factor for this Cougars team. He has 642 rushing yards. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry and 8 rushing touchdowns already thus far in the season. He's made his living rushing behind the left side of this BYU offensive line. That's where the experience is. We'll kind of break down the offensive line later in the episode, but he's done his damage through the A gap and the B gap on that left side. And so that's something to watch, is whether that front seven for Baylor can slow down this rushing attack. He's averaging over 7 yards per carry rushing in those two gaps on the left side. He has 15 first downs, 3 touchdowns, and almost 10 rushes of 10 or more yards when running in those gaps behind those big offensive linemen. So that's going to be a key, and that's a tendency that Baylor's got to pick up on and try to find a way to slow down Algier in this rushing attack. And on top of that, you cannot forget about Jaron Hall's legs, especially, as things break down, he gets outside the pocket because Baylor's going to have to be disciplined in their rushing lanes, and they're going to have to be aware about, Hall's ability to get out of the pocket, make a play out of nothing, because even if you play perfect coverage, if you aren't disciplined in the front end of your defense, Hall's going to burn you with his legs. He's averaging over 7 yards per carry, has 11 first downs and 10 rushes of 10 or more yards. He's so explosive when he can get out into the open field. And if Hall is dynamic and explosive on Saturday, that's going to go a long way in determining whether BYU can get out of here with a win, a huge road non-conference win for the Cougars. Now, Jaron Hall's passing ability can't be overlooked as well. The rushing game will give him favorable matchups down the field and help him avoid pressure against a strong Bears front seven. But he's going to have to throw the ball here and put up some points because, you know, Baylor has the ability to put up a lot of points, especially with that downfield passing attack they have, the excellent run game they have. So Jaron Hall is going to probably have to have his best game of the season. Now, he's thrown for over 800 yards this year, 8 passing touchdowns, 3 picks. He was battling an injury. He came back last week against Boise State, so this will be a second game back from injury. But the play action is where he really shines. I mean, he's completing over 61% of his passes off of play action attempts, over 8 yards of completion, 6 touchdowns, and only 1 turnover. But the biggest thing about the rushing attack is it should keep him from being under pressure all game. So under pressure is where Hall has to get a little bit better. Only completing 42% of his passes, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and grades at a 55.2 passing grade by Pro Football Focus. When you can get to Hall, that has to be where he where he improves his accuracy and just composure when he gets under pressure. But the top aspect of his game, and this is going to be one I'm so interested to see, because when the defense gets aggressive against Hall and they blitz, if the O-line can give him just a bit of time in the pocket, Hall can make you play. And it's going to be interesting to see how an aggressive Aranda defense does against Hall. And if they bring a lot of blitzes, because that's where Hall's game has really shined. Against the blitz, he's completing almost 70% of his passes, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and has a 91 passing grade against the blitz this year. That's where Hall lives, and that's where he shines. So it's going to be interesting on if that front 3-4 for Baylor can get pressure on Hall this weekend. Because if you can't and you have to bring the blitz, if that offensive line holds up, Hall is going to pick you apart on the back end. So those are the keys for BYU. Now for Baylor, it's clear as day for me. And I like to pick a specific thing, but it has to be Baylor's key has to be balanced. They have to put pressures on all levels of this BYU defense, because the Bears are at their best, guys, when the running game and the passing game are working together, and they're all clicking at the same time, and it keeps the defense completely off balance. And that's what you saw last week against West Virginia, and that's what you failed to see, especially in the first half against Oklahoma State. They just could not get that offense in rhythm and get it rolling. Now, they're averaging over 460 yards per game and 227 on the ground. They're averaging 233 through the air, and their rushing attack is averaging over 6 yards per carry per game this season. That is great production. But for me, I want to start with Jerry Bohannon at the quarterback spot, because for me, I did not see this type of performance, in the preseason coming from him. He's exceeded any and all expectations, in my opinion. And if he continues to have the type of performance that he's been having this season, Baylor's going to be a very, very tough team to beat for BYU. You look at him throwing for over 1,300 yards. He's averaging over 10 yards an attempt, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 6 rushing touchdowns. And the reason I say balance is because, like Hall, almost 50% of Baylor's passing attempts come off the play action. He's completing over 70% of his passes off the play action, averaging over 11 yards per an attempt, 8 touchdowns, and has an 86 passing grade in those play action attempts. That's where Bohannon is so comfortable. That's where he gets the more favorable matchups on the outside, and Baylor's got some very talented wide receivers to go make plays in man up situations and or favorable, zone coverage concepts. But for me, the deep ball is going to be something to watch this weekend because Bohannon has excelled when pushing the ball deep down the field. And this is really, they've played some good teams, but really and truly Bohannon offers the most talented and viable deep field passing threat that this BYU defense has seen all season. Jaden Daniels is probably the best quarterback they've seen, maybe Hank Bachmeier, and neither of them really are the type of downfield passer that Bohannon really brings into this matchup. On deep passes, Bohannon has 6 touchdowns and has a 92.7 passing grade, and he's had over 400 yards of deep passes, 20 plus yards down the field. He can let it fly. He's efficient with it. And when he can hit those passes, this Baylor offense goes to another level. If the deep ball's clicking for Baylor's offense, they become damn near unstoppable in terms of what they can do on the football field. And if Bohannon can establish that deep ball this weekend, it could be a long day for the Cougars, especially because you're probably going to have to load the box at times because this Bears rushing attack has been overlooked all season. It's a two-headed monster, and this BYU defense is only allowing about 3.5 yards per carry. But man, this Baylor rushing attack has not been really held down, other than maybe the Oklahoma State game for at times. But Abraham Smith, man, almost 600 yards rushing, 7.7 yards per attempt, and 7 rushing touchdowns. And Treston Ebner, over 400 yards rushing, 6 yards per carry, and a receiving touchdown. Those two guys are going to have to do their thing. So what Baylor's going to do, in my opinion, is they're going to lean on Smith and Ebner to force BYU to load the box and then just let Bohannon air it out on these play action deep shots, get it to his playmakers, and make the defense make plays. They're going to put pressure on BYU to play very disciplined and execute at such a high level. And if you allow Baylor to be explosive, it's going to be very, very hard to beat this Bears team because they're already pretty consistent moving the ball down the field. If you just allow explosive play after explosive play, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Hall and that BYU offense to score more than they like. BYU's not a high scoring team. They're not going to try to go up there and put 40, 50 up like they did last year. This Bears team, if they start putting up points, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Hall and that BYU offense. And so if the Bears can establish these aspects of their offense, it's going to turn this game into the exact type of game where Baylor's going to thrive and BYU's probably not going to be in their comfort zone. So that's why I'm picking be balanced, let Bohannon air it out and do his thing through the air while also not forgetting about Smith and Ebner on the ground for the Bears. Now, moving to matchup to watch. This one has me so excited, but it has to be this Baylor front seven and Dave Aranda's, pass rushing scheme against this BYU offensive line, which has been dominant at times this season. It's going to be a huge aspect of this game in determining whether the rushing attack for the Cougars is working, and also can Hall be kept clean, because we've already talked about how when you get pressure on him, he turns into a different quarterback. And now the BYU offensive line's been one of the better offensive lines to this point in the season. They have the size and physicality that, really makes them viable against almost any D-line that they see in the country. Now, they've only allowed 3 total sacks, 7 QB hits, and only 26 pressures all season long. That is elite level production when you're getting into week 7. Now, you're looking at this Cougar schedule, and they're going to have to replicate what they did against some of these top defensive lines that they've seen. But I would say the front seven this weekend for Baylor is probably the best front seven that they've seen thus far. You can maybe make an argument for Utah, but for me, I think Baylor has some serious playmakers on the front end of that defense. Now, the big question for me is whether Harris LaChance takes his right tackle spot back because he's been practicing. He could see the field again this weekend, or if BYU sticks with freshman Campbell Barrington at right tackle, who might be making his 3rd consecutive start. Both of these guys have played well, but Barrington, in his short time, has become one of the better pass blockers in his limited action on this offensive line. So that's going to be an interesting question for me, is who's going to suit up at right tackle for the Cougars. The anchors on this offensive line, though, Blake Freeland at left tackle and center James Empey, they both have only allowed one pressure this season, and they have some of the best pass blocking grades in the country, with Freeland at a 95.1, which is right up there with one of the best in the country, and Empey with 88.8 pass blocking grade. Both of these guys do not allow pressures. They pave the way for Algier in this rushing attack. So for me, Freeland and Impey are going to have to anchor this offensive line and bring them along with them and keep Hall clean and pave some rushing lanes for Algier in this rushing attack. Now, Baylor's front seven, though, they got some real talent, and you have to credit Aranda for bringing in the talent to shore up this defensive front from last season. Yes, they're allowing about 140 yards rushing per game, but they're holding teams to less than 4 yards per carry. They have 15 sacks and 62 pressures this season. And for me, the emergence of nose tackle Siaki Ika from LSU has been the difference, really and truly, of this defensive front. He's created opportunities for Gabe Hall and Cole Maxwell to make plays at that edge spot. You know, Ika's the highest graded pass rusher for this Bears defense with 3 sacks and 6 tackles for this team at nose guard, which is pretty great because nose guard, you guys know, I don't get that. You can't look at a stat line for a nose guard. When you look at the double team blocks he demands and the attention he demands on the inside, Hall and Maxwell are able to go make plays on the edge. Now, Ika had 2 sacks last week against West Virginia and really was the catalyst for this Bears defense having their best game of the season last week against West Virginia. Every time that Doji and those guys stepped back to take a shot, that pocket was collapsing on them. So Ika, Hall, and Maxwell are some guys to watch this weekend. Now, the linebacker spot, Terrell Bernard and Garmin Randolph are going to be the guys to watch for the Bears. I honestly think Bernard has established himself as a top 5 linebacker in the country. I've been a huge Bernard fan on this podcast. 30 tackles, 2 sacks, 2.5 for loss. He was out with a meniscus injury at one point, but he's back and he looked legit last weekend against West Virginia. And Randolph was unavailable earlier this season due to injury, but him coming back immediately offers an upgrade at that jack position for this Bears defense, which is a very important position in the Aranda scheme. So this is going to come down to whether the Bears can get pressure and limit this rushing attack, and or if BYU can win the line of scrimmage. That's going to go a long way to determining if the Cougars can pull off the upset in Waco this weekend. Now, this is the second game I've covered for both of these teams this year. I picked BYU to beat Arizona State. They did. And I picked Baylor to beat Oklahoma State, and they didn't. So it's like, got to hedge my bets here. But really and truly looking at it, I trust Bohannon and this Baylor offense to score just a little bit more than I trust BYU to score on this front seven. I think Terrell Bernard and that front seven of Baylor gets some pressure on Hall, forces them into a mistake or two, and Bohannon in this rushing attack for Baylor just makes enough plays down the stretch to win a very close game. I think this game is going to be close down the stretch. I think Baylor pulls away a little bit late. I have the Baylor Bears winning this one 30-21 over BYU this weekend in Waco, Texas. I think it's going to be a very, very competitive game. I'm going to be tuned in. I think this is one of the best matchups of the weekend, but I'm going with the Bears 30, the Cougars 21 this weekend in Waco, Texas. So, guys, if you're new, go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and like the video and also share it, man. I appreciate y'all's support so much. Go check out our Week 7 college football content playlist for all our other previews, our mailbag live show from yesterday. We got into some great topics with all of you guys. And also, man, just make sure to comment your score predictions below and let me know your thoughts on this big game this weekend in Waco, Texas. But, guys, we'll be back this afternoon with another preview. And the rest of this week, we got previews dropping every day up until Saturday when all the games kick off. But, guys, appreciate y'all's support. And I can't thank y'all enough for tuning into the Blue Bloods. But for right now, we are out.